The stream is live. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Watching 100 Movies. I'm Christiana Ellis.
And I'm Mike Martine.
And tonight, we are talking about movies where noble heroes fight for those in need against the forces aligned against them. Uh, this topic is came originally just from the idea of, hey, what about Seven Samurai? The Akira Kurosawa film from 1954, but then realizing, hey, that was remade into a western called Magnificent Seven, also good. And then that movie was also remade into another, the Magnificent Seven in 2016, and we could talk about all of them. It was also made into a sci-fi movie called Battle Beyond the Stars, I think, but we didn't watch that one. I haven't seen it, so I can't comment on whether it's good or not, but I only realized midway through our period that there was another one, so we're going to stick to discussion of these, and probably primarily the Seven Samurai and the Magnificent Seven 1960 version, because you mentioned you weren't able to watch the 2016
Yes,
version.
and originally those were the two that we were focused
It's
on.
true.
We elected to add the other one because we thought it would be interesting, and I just was
Yeah.
unable to watch it and didn't want to hold up our discussion
Right.
off of a movie that was a late edition. So
Well, we'll talk a little bit more about it because I did watch it and I can comment on it a little bit. But what I can say is that of the three, I think that's the one to miss. Like, it's honestly better than I felt like I was led to expect, because I feel like I had remembered hearing that it was like actively bad, like not good, which
right,
is a little strange considering the pedigree. I mean, it's got a great cast and it's directed by Antoine Fuqua, who's done a number of great movies. So why would it be bad? And the answer is it's not. It's just fine. It's a western. It's an action western. It's Now I think what the reviews I read of it that were harsh on it, their criticisms are valid, which is that it takes out a lot of the themes from the story and makes it a little bit more of like just an action western that doesn't have a lot to say.
mm,
Um, which, like, I think it's fair to miss that, but I think also those criticisms do not give the movie credit for the things that it does do well, which is a fair amount. So, but of the three, yeah, that's the one I think you can skip. So let's talk about the basic premise of both of these movies and our history with them. Had you seen either of these before?
I've seen the Magnificent Seven a couple of times. I had not seen Seven Samurai.
Uh, See, I had not seen either of them, although I was certainly familiar with the basic conceptual layout of the story, namely that you had a poor village of farmers that hired samurai and or gunslingers to protect them against bandits, and that's the story. And so that is the story for both of them. But I was delighted to watch both. So first of all, though, just gut check. Which one you like better?
So I I don't know if it's because it was new to me, but I think I kind of like the Seven Samurai.
I don't know if it's just because it's new to you. I certainly preferred that one of the two.
Yeah, I what I like about what Magnificent Seven does, especially now that I've seen them both,
Mm-hmm.
is that it does to your point about the criticism and probably why the criticism exists of the third one is that it does maintain it very much is a remake
Mm-hmm.
with a new lens to it. And but what I like is that they didn't just take the story and move it to the West. They also took all of the things that make great westerns great, like epic vistas and
Mm-hmm.
great landscapes, and they integrated that into it, which does give it a different flavor, which I really enjoyed. But there's something about I don't know. There's something just with the characters in Seven Samurai and their like the way they kind of bond together and the way they interact with each other. I just think delivers that part of it, the character development part of it, just delivers at a different level. Magnificent Seven almost feels like more of like, we made all the interesting characters that are part of this story, but they don't mesh together quite as well. They're not bad, but
Mm-hmm.
it didn't feel like it came as tight as Seven Samurai. So at the end, when they've got the what do you call it, a Pyrrhic victory, um,
Well,
and they're
yeah, it's it's a victory for them, not for us. That
yeah,
so to speak. That's the
right, where they ended up losing more than there was
yeah.
because they
Well,
that I think
four
that's
of
the
the seven are killed.
right, and I think that's on purpose so that it is the majority of them,
Right.
without just killing off all of our heroes. But
Mm-hmm.
it is kind of a like I said, it's a Pyrrhic victory, a bittersweet victory, whatever you want to think. It 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 hit a little bit more in the heart when it happened in Seven Samurai. Like it felt a little worse that they lost
Mm.
their friends that had become friends through this journey.
Right. Yeah.
Not that it doesn't feel bad in Magnificent Seven. I just felt a little bit more here.
Well, one of the things that I think helps that is that Seven Samurai is like 45 minutes longer than Magnificent Seven. But one of the things that I think is interesting about that is that the pacing is incredible. It is a long movie, almost 3 hours, and yet I was like, even during the scenes that are slower and are not action or anything, like I was not bored for a moment. It was just everything just keeps moving in a way that just keeps the interest active throughout. I think it was really incredible. But so
I
that
think I'm not gonna be too critical. I think it's longer than 3 hours.
am I wrong? So let's see. Oh no, you're right. It's so 3 hours and 27 minutes. So
Yeah, I was
that's
gonna say I think it's
actually
almost two and a half.
yeah.
Yeah,
So that's an hour and 20 minutes longer then. So I think that so the risk you run with a long movie like that is that you lose the audience's interest. But if you can hold it, it's that much more time to get to know these characters, right? And so I think that's part of why they feel more fleshed out. Um, it's ambitious to try to make it that long so that we get to know all those characters so well, because we get to know not only the seven samurai, but we get to know like five or six of the townsfolk pretty well. um, and
yeah,
yeah, and that's all pretty significant. Like whereas I think in Magnificent Seven, as far as townsfolk, like there's one or two of the adults that we know. We know the old guy, and then there's the kids who are kind of like a trio. Like we don't know anything about any of the individual kids, like as a person. It's more like, oh, the three kids, right?
right.
Um, that that actually just reminds me. Maybe it'll come up again later, but I have to say, in the Magnificent Seven, I like it a lot as a movie, but it contains one of the most awkward shots I have seen in a long time, and that is, of course, the shot where Charles Bronson spontaneously spanks like a 12-year-old. And it's just so awkward. Not just because the content of it, but just because it looks weird when it happens. It's not even just like, oh, it's weird for this guy to be spanking a kid. It's just like when it happens, you're just like, what are you doing? Because he grabs him by one shoulder and like pulls him over sort of awkwardly like this, and then does a spank like over the top, like across his back. It's such a weird shot. I just like it. It really leapt out at me. So I had to say
Yeah, no, I
something.
agree.
So you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
Oh yeah,
Yeah, it's weird when it happens. Now, I mean, obviously, it's a meaningful scene. The awkwardness of the spank aside, that's a good example of one of the themes of both stories, which is the spanking results from one of the kids saying, like, you guys are brave, our fathers are cowards. And that's what sets off the spanking, because is basically saying, like, what he's saying is I only have to be brave for me. Your father has people to lose. He has responsibilities, and he was willing to take those things on. That is something I have always been too scared to do. And so, don't how dare you call your father a coward when he is doing everything he can think of to protect you and your family. Uh,
Exactly.
yeah, which is a nice moment. But I feel like let's in lieu of some other structure, do we want to just briefly? Um, I don't know. I didn't plan a structure very well. Do you have any thoughts that leap out at you, and we could kind of maybe just let talk about the characters, right? Like because
Yeah.
the seven
I think that
characters. Well, go ahead.
yeah, I think I was going to say that I think the characters is the thing that we should focus on because
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes these movies special,
Right.
and like I already kind of led it a little bit. I think it's part of why I liked the Seven Samurai better is because a little like you said a little bit more character development
Mm-hmm.
and not even just the character development. There's just something with the way that they kind of bond as a group and how
Mm-hmm.
they like just even subtle things like when we'll get to all of them, but when there's the character that they didn't originally want
Mm-hmm.
and he follows them there and he's kind of a you know jokester
Mm-hmm.
and the way that he kind of becomes not just through his development but when he as he develops the way they kind of bring him into the group
Mm-hmm.
um it just feels on a different level than the other one. So I think again the character development I think is a good focus because the plot is I mean the plot's good but that's
Well,
not
well,
that the
and
whole
also.
point is that yeah they come together as a group to defend these guys and
Mm-hmm.
they lose four of their people to help these peasants
Yeah,
but
and I mean the plot more or less is the same, right?
yeah
It's just the details are different, but the broad strokes of the plot are the same. We begin the movie in both cases with learning that there's this group of roving bandits that have been stealing from a town and are planning to come back at some intermediate future date to steal more, to the point where the farmers are desperate enough to do something about it, right? It's one of the things that is different between Seven Samurai and Magnificent Seven. I think when we say Magnificent Seven, we're going to mean the 1961. When we talk about the 2016 one, we'll be more clear. Like we'll specify. But um, the the Magnificent Seven puts a lot more like and by a lot more I mean some effort into actually humanizing and creating a character for the bandits, right? Like the bandits in Seven Samurai, like we get to know like the one general, but not even as a character, more just like, oh, that's the leader, you
yeah
know. So you have to pay attention because he's the leader. You don't really know the characters at all. Whereas, certainly we have, Eli Wallach playing Calvera, I think, right? Go ahead
yeah
and name him Skull for anyone who doesn't know that, right? I mean, I'm right about that, right?
yeah
Yeah. But they actually make him a character, which is interesting. Um, but yeah, so let's talk about starting with Seven Samurai. Let's talk about the seven of them, right? Or do you think it's better to go through the Seven Samurai and then switch over to Magnificent Seven, or do we think it's better to pick one of the samurai and then talk about who is their counterpart?
I like doing all seven of the samurai because that's kind of how the movies are done is how they like work together and
Mm-hmm.
grow together
Mm-hmm.
and then we can talk then about Magnificent Seven and what similarities they ported over, what differences they added, and kind of how they gelled together in a
Okay.
different way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So to begin, we have Kanbai Shimada is the character, the leader of the samurai, the first recruited, who we meet when he is shaving his head and taking off his armor to dress as a monk, so as to fool a thief who has taken a kid hostage. Um, and which is such a perfect way to introduce this character, because we had established already that the farmers were struggling, because it's one thing to hire samurai, but not all samurai are people who are going to say, sure, I'll go risk my life for nothing but a bowl of rice every day. What would it, like a lot of them, like they had, people react violently, derisively, so on. But this guy is, he's cutting off all his hair, which is a whole thing, in this culture. And he is making himself look humble and then going in unarmed to face danger, in order to save a kid. So that's definitely, for the farmers, they're like, that seems like the guy to talk to.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So he is the leader. He's the oldest, I think. Would seem to be the oldest. He's kind of the most experienced. He's not quite, he's kind of mature and rock steady in terms of his demeanor. And then his sort of second in command, who is an old friend of his that he meets up with, is Shichiroji, who they establish once they like meet up again, is that they knew each other. They've known each other for a long time, and so they're. And I think there's even a reference early on when they've both agreed to do this job. It's kind of like, maybe this is the one that kills us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this relationship is so key to like the whole movie because he's not just his right hand man. He's his confidant
Right.
as a right hand man, and they sort of while he is the I always forget on their names on this one, but I'll just say the leader.
Kambe. Well, so
Yeah,
I made a cheat sheet for for us. Um,
yeah.
so
Oh yeah, let me grab that.
yeah.
Yeah, Kanbei. Yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
while Kanbei is the leader, it is very clear that Shichiro Ji
Mm-hmm.
is equal partner in like some of the decision making, especially when
Yeah.
they're able to kind of deliberate um, on kind of what they want to do, and I like that
Mm-hmm.
because it's not, it's very much a like a unit, and again, it's part of what makes the end so powerful. Like when they're kind of two of the three sitting there together, kind of
Mm-hmm.
reflecting on this,
Yeah. Yeah. So
they're yeah, you bought into that because they reflect at different stages in the movie with each other, and like I said, they deliberate and they come up with the plan, and they don't even just talk about the plan, but they sort of talk about the what's happening and how they're feeling about it and things like that.
mm-hmm.
It makes for a really good dialogue of kind of what is the mentality of this group
Right.
between instead of using like a monologue like you might traditionally use of how the leader is feeling. He has this confidant who they bounce ideas off of each other, and you get to feel what the group is feeling without the monologue,
Right.
the
Plus,
voiceover. Yeah.
it builds in them discussing the situation, builds in exposition for us.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Uh,
in multiple parts of the movie, it's not just this, and it begins with this one where we kind of learn what's going on, but then yeah, there's like it's like checkpoints in the movie. To your point about pacing, I
mm-hmm.
think their relationship is part of what helps the pacing because they kind of give us that as they go along. It's not exposition at that point, but it's sort
Mm-hmm.
of a kind of a reflection on what we've seen and what's to come. It's very much it helps kind of segment the movie.
So I believe if so, I have them in this order here, kind of like almost ranked by importance. Not that's not the right way to put it. The rank that I have them in here, the order of the list is not the order that they appear, right? Because we meet Kanbei first, but then there's also the next on the list is Kachuhiro,
Right.
who is the young starry-eyed, technically a samurai because it's a caste thing, but doesn't have a lot of experience. Does have a sword, he's walking around with it, but he's mostly feeling like, I feel like I wish I knew what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe if I could get someone who actually knows what they're talking about to mentor me, that would be great. And so he kind of latches on with Kanbei and is wanting to be, treated, given these lessons and all that. But for a while, Kanbei is like, no, 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 thanks. But eventually, he just, won't take no for an answer. He's persistent enough that it's like, all right, well, I guess you can tag along. I'm not gonna like hit you to make you go away or anything. And so enlists him to help with auditioning the other samurai, and including the like the here, take this stick and hide just inside the door. And when this guy comes in, you try to hit him with the stick. We're testing him to see.
Yeah.
Um, Now, if I believe that the next person on the list is actually the first person that happens for. Because there's two people that they try that trick on, and I can't remember for sure which one was which. But so the first time they try the trick, he swings it, and the guy reacts fast enough to like stop the blow, and then kind of do like a flip on Kazuhiro. I think that was Gorobai.
I thought that the first person that did it did not join them because I thought it was establishing that like not every samurai was willing to do
Oh, you
this.
know what? I think you're right. I think you're right. That's why I was confused, because I was trying to remember later who was that guy? Which guy was that? And I think you're right that, now that you say that, I feel like I'm sure you're right that that is what happens. And so they get him in. He's tough enough to spot the attack, but they explain the situation, and he's like, "No, I don't think so." Um,
Yeah.
but then it's when Shichiroji shows up. That's the one where he's coming in, and he looks through the door, and we see him like standing like 5 feet out of the doorway still. Katsuhiro has got his stick ready, and he just looks in and he sees Kanbei, and he's just like, "Surely you're kidding." Like, what? This is so obviously a trap. What am I doing? I'm gonna do. But also, it's that plus the fact of like, oh hey, I know you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we've got those guys, and then Gorobai, when he does show up, he like mostly I think like I remember him. He's the archer, and I think his other big character beat is that he is one of the ones later that is super mad when they discover that the farmers have secret samurai weapons. Am I
I
right?
don't remember which one. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't.
But mostly what I remember from him is that he was the guy with the bow and arrow who was great, and like he was there, but like he didn't have as pronounced a character as some. Um, but then of course we also have Kyozo, which is the taciturn badass, is the phrase I put on my cheat sheet here. But I feel like that's pretty apt for him.
Yeah.
And this is the guy that they encounter where he's having what is supposed to at first be just a test of skill, but because the other guy is too proud to accept that he lost a close test, insists that they duel, and then is dispatched easily by Kyozo.
Yep.
But Kyozo is basically like, he doesn't want it to be a duel, but he's also not willing to say he lost if that's not what happened.
Right.
And so, but he's pretty awesome, and like because Kanbei is showing no interest at all in being, the official mentor. There's a little bit of Katsuhiro looking over at him and Kyozo and saying, maybe he's pretty awesome. Um, and I will say, that character gets what I think might be one of the most badass things I've ever seen in a movie, which is and it's a beat that gets used in Mad Max Fury Road later too, which is they're looking out into the woods. They've already learned that the bandits have these muskets that are really dangerous, and they're looking out and saying, "Oh, they're out there. If only we could get one of those muskets." And Kyozo was kind of just hanging out and kind of just goes, "All right." He just goes and he like runs off into the dark woods in the middle of the night. And they're like, "Oh, okay." And then he doesn't come back for a long time, and they're all feeling like this is bad. But then eventually, he just comes wandering back into camp along the same road, holding one of the muskets, hands it over, says, "I got two of them," and then immediately sits down and tries to start like taking a nap.
Yeah.
And it's just like, whoa, that guy's incredible. But
Yeah.
like in Mad Max Fury Road, there's the whole bit where Max runs back to finish off the bullet farmer people who are coming, right?
Right.
And then
Yeah.
comes back with the boot and all that.
Yeah.
um,
That was a tremendous scene.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and that inspires action from one of the other characters that we'll talk about in a moment. But we've also got Heihachi, who we meet as a down on his luck samurai who is currently resorting to chopping wood for money. Um, but he seems like he's got a good sense of humor, and Shichiroji tells Kanbei, "I think he'll be a good guy to have around when things are hard." Because he keeps people in high spirits, and he's fun and optimistic and good company. Um,
Yep.
and then the last of the seven is Kikuchiyo, who we meet as this guy who is walking around. First of all, he has one of the I want to say it's like an odachi, where it's like a katana but extra long.
Yeah.
He's got one of those swords, and he comes around, swaggering around, does not act dignified like a samurai should. He's getting drunk. He's trying to get people to like challenge him, but no one's really giving him the time of day. He wants to kind of join up, but they don't think he's up to it, and he walks through the whole movie with this like chip on his shoulder of like wanting to help and kind of prove himself. And then eventually what we learn about him is that he was not born into the samurai class. He has kind of seized the position himself. One of the things, though, that I learned in the trivia that explains a certain scene, like when he is trying to prove to the other samurai that he is also a samurai, he produces this scroll that he says is proof. It is his pedigree, it is his lineage that proves he is of the samurai caste and therefore deserves to fight alongside them. And they all laugh at his name and at the fact that if this document is accurate and referring to him, he is 13 years old, which is transparently not true. But the other thing is that I didn't realize is that Kikuchiyo is a girl's name.
Yeah.
Uh,
I didn't
and
realize that until they mentioned that in the movie, don't they?
well, I guess if they did, I missed it. But it is I didn't catch in the movie that they said that, but it is in the
Maybe I read that somewhere too. Then I do remember seeing that somewhere also,
yeah.
whether it was in the movie or not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So in any case, though, they recognize that he has got like if it's a real document, it's not his. And that he is probably not able to read it in any case, or he wouldn't have presented it the way he did. But nonetheless, they decide, he follows along behind them, even though they have kind of firmly rebuffed him. And then as they're traveling to the village, he keeps showing up and tagging along. We get some fun beats that are replicated almost exactly in Magnificent Seven. Of like they keep seeing him back there, and then one day they look back and they don't see him. It's like, oh, gosh, I almost miss him. And then he suddenly turns out he's up in front of them now. He's trying to impress them by beating them to where they're going. But he's a fun character too because he's obviously like outmatched in terms of like he's an okay fighter, but he's more scrappy than disciplined. Um,
Yep.
and he does not know how to ride a horse despite his protests otherwise. There's a great shot of him trying to ride this horse, riding into one side of a barn, and then just the horse comes out the other side. I think it's actually a covered bridge or something, but so we eventually learn that he was born as a farmer, and that he has a lot of emotional baggage tied up in that. Um, but he fights alongside the samurai as well, and and though it costs him his life at the end, he is the one to fell the bandit leader.
Yep.
Yeah. And as we were just saying, he reacts. So when Kyozo does his super badass thing, stealing one of the muskets, and Katsuhiro is talking about how cool that was, that inspires Kikuchiyo to try his own daring, raid to get one of the muskets, which works in the sense that he ends up with one and kills a couple of people. But the problem is that they chase him back into the village, and the ensuing skirmish gets a couple of the townsfolk killed.
And isn't that where Gorobe dies too?
Um, one of the notable townsfolk dies in that moment. I think Gorbai dies near then. You might be right, but I was thinking more in particular that was the old guy with the sad looking face, townsfolk guy gets killed in that bit.
Yeah, I agree, but I think
You might
that
be right. I don't remember it specifically, but certainly. Well, okay. I think you're right, but the reason I didn't connect it is just because it's a little bit more of an extended sequence. Like, by the time things calm down again, Gorobe has been killed. But I didn't think of it as much of a direct connection again.
right. Well, and so the only reason because one of the themes in this movie that I have to cheat. I read this when I was
Mm.
reading about the movie, but it's definitely there. Is that um, for the most part, like the samurai all die very unglamorous deaths,
Mm.
and like so Gorobai like doesn't even die on screen, which is why it's hard to remember. Like you said, they
Oh,
come
right. Yeah.
back
Mm-hmm.
and they find out that
Yeah.
Gorobai had
Yeah.
been killed in the skirmish. So you're right. Like we see the townsperson killed,
Yeah. I think you're right. Yeah.
and then Gorobai is also killed. And then
Well,
like I
and
think
yeah.
yeah, Kyozo gets like shot in the back and then like falls face down in the mud.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really spectacular. It's just very kind of blah. And then
Heihachi.
Kikuchio, yeah,
Well, so like Heihachi is the first one to die. He
yeah,
dies on the raid of the bandit camp, but like he dies where like we don't even really realize muskets are in the offing. It's more a matter of like they're trying to regroup to run away after their successful raid, and all of a sudden there's a gunshot, and he just kind of clutches his gut and sort of falls over, and everyone's just like, wait, what? What just happened?
yeah.
But now he's dead, and that's like, oh god. So it's certainly not like he doesn't get a big scene or anything. Um, but
Yeah, and that I think it's important thematically because like there's something very gritty about that.
mm-hmm,
These are some of the most glamorous sword fighters and battle people that we know, and there's these this huge that duel at the beginning with where
mm-hmm,
Kyozo kills the guy off, and then these big scenes where they do big like where Kyozo steals muskets, and they're so much bigger than life, but when it
mm-hmm.
comes down to their deaths, like they aren't. They just like even Kikuchio when he rushes into the hut, like he just gets shot, and
Yeah,
yes, he has that heroic moment of killing the leader,
right.
but there's not much like the fact that had a heroic death is what's important. He did not have like this glamorous
Mm-hmm,
death. The death is all very gritty and very
right.
just kind of like
Well, and I think the thing that hurts so much about that one is that it feels like the fight's over. Like it's so obvious that the bandits have been, almost entirely routed. There's no hope left for victory on their side. It's just cleanup now. but we haven't hunted down the leader yet. And that's when he gets shot, going into, rushing into one of the houses there. And he gets shot running in. And he's able to like hold it together long enough to finish the leader off, but like it's also just unglamorous in the sense that it felt like the battle was won already. If they had been a little more patient, maybe that could have been, the leader could have been taken care of without any more losses, but that was not his nature.
Nope.
But yeah, so those are, the and so you're right that like that's where Kikuchiyo has a long, section the night before that last battle where he is just distraught because he got so caught up in like, oh, Kyozo was so cool, and I would like people to look at me the way Kachuhiro is looking at Kyozo. I want to be cool like that too. I want to be brave and powerful. And then his attempt to do it initially feels like a success, only to have it come at such a cost.
Right.
And like Kanbei actually says after things die down a little bit, that like he's marking off. They've got this little map they've made out where they're marking off how many of the 40 bandits have been killed, and he marks off like another 7 of them. Yeah, but he says, but that those 7 came at a high price. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, like sort of a weird dark advent calendar.
Yeah. Well, and like it's such a good just a visual storytelling tool because it's on the same map that they used to show us that there are these 4 ways to get into the town and the different things that they do to like cover each of those to give us a little bit of a sense of the geography of it and to have it be like, well, it's just a town, but we want to establish these 4 fronts that there are going to be things happening at and what each one is, right? Like, so there's the flooded fields side, there's the grove side, there's the mountain side, and so on, right? So it's on that map, and then he also just marks out the, like, well, we believe they have 40 people, so let's count how many have been killed.
Yep.
But so let's, you mentioned themes, so let's talk a little bit about themes because we got into one a little bit earlier, like mentioning it in context of Magnificent. Well, so do we want to talk about themes yet, or maybe we talk about the characters in Magnificent Seven first?
We can move to the characters of Magnificent Seven.
Okay.
That makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So over in the Magnificent Seven, we start at the top again with the leader of the group, Chris, played by Yul Brynner. And according to IMDb, his character's name is Chris Larrabee Adams, although I don't think he's called anything but Chris in the movie.
I don't remember anything different. Yeah.
And so just in terms of my little cheat sheet, and I was trying to like, here's how we remember things, I mentioned that like, yeah, he's the leader, and he also has a shaved head. Just like Kanbei. And so Yul Brynner in as Chris in this movie is he's the dressed in black cowboy, and he so but at the same time he's got that same sort of cool, calm demeanor, right? Like I think he's very much a match for Kanbei in terms of like. Some of the characters map directly to each other more than others, but I think his is pretty close there, right? And then we have Steve McQueen as Vin, where again IMDb offers that his last name is Tanner, but I don't know if they ever actually say that in the movie. Doesn't matter. But in any case, Steve, he's the the guy who's in Magnificent Seven, they're not old friends, but they certainly meet and bond at the beginning of the movie when the 2 of them agree to escort a hearse to carry a a Native American man up to be buried on Boot Hill, which is dangerous because there are people in town who oppose to the idea of having a Native American person buried, even in Boot Hill, which is like where they bury just like criminals and people who have no money. So it's a little interesting that they like their race is not really a factor in the movie at any other point, but they kind of they have the two heroes establish their heroism up front by defending the giving the last rites to a Native American in the face of bigotry. Like literally to the point where like they have to shoot a guy's gun out of his hand in order to successfully accomplish this burial. But so clearly, I think we've got Chris and Vin very much similar mapping to Kanbei and Shichiroji.
Yeah, and they, as far as their sort of exposition and scene marking, they do a little bit of it. It's not as dramatic, but again, to the point you made earlier, like the movie's also an hour and a half shorter, so it doesn't require that kind of constant like pacing and exposition throughout it.
Yeah, there's a lot less.
But they do use it a little. Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry,
there's a lot less geography and logistics of the fight, right? It's more like they focus on we're training the farmers how to shoot, and mentioning how like, well, we don't have enough guns. It was like, well, you're gonna get them when we take them off the ones you kill, so you need to be ready to use them when you get them. But yeah, there's a lot less of like the map of like, here's how we do this part and here's how we do that part. We see them doing a little bit of like the digging ditches and building little stone walls and stuff, but they don't go to the trouble of explaining to us that like, this is the South Road and this is how we're going to take care of that approach and so on. They just kind of do it.
Right.
And so I think in the next character that we have as like a perfect match is James Coburn as Brit, who is very much the Kyozo role, to the point where he literally said that he absolutely based his character on the mannerisms of the guy who played Kyozo in Seven Samurai. So like he was like not merely a script match, but the actor even was deliberately channeling it. So so what we have is Brit, who is like, he's a gunslinger, but he wins a duel with a guy where he throws a switchblade instead of firing a gun. Which, I mean, he accomplishes it, but it does seem kind of dangerous. Like, why risk that? But oh well, he's that confident in his abilities, I guess.
Yep.
But yeah, so he's a pretty close match there. I think Bernardo O'Reilly, played by Charles Bronson, like he's kind of, from a script perspective, sort of in the Heihachi role, but he also gets Kikuchiyo's relationship with the kids. So like in Seven Samurai, Kikuchiyo is the one that has this kind of grumpy old man with a heart of gold relationship with the town kids. Bernardo has that role in this one, even though he's the one that we meet wood chopping, for example, and he's also not the high-spirited, funny guy that that Heihachi was. He's the grouch.
Yeah, which is Kikuchiyo's role. Also, he's a little bit not. He's not a grouch. I guess he's not really a grouch, but he has some of those like cynical.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so you're right that we've got a little bit of mix and matching there, especially because we also have in Magnificent Seven we have Chico, played by Horst Buchholz, who is really kind of a combination of Kikuchiyo and Katsuhiro, because he is also the ex-farmer kind of making a play at being a gunslinger who gets drunk and is kind of disreputable, but he is also the young kid who really wants to be shown the way by someone who knows what he's doing.
Yep.
So he's kind of the combination there, but you're right that Bernardo kind of gets some of Kikuchiyo's other personality bits, while Chico is kind of combining um, those other two characters. And then the remaining two characters in Magnificent Seven, um, we have Harry Luck, who is basically kind of like uh, his whole gimmick, I think, in the story really is, first of all, he's the old friend. He's the guy that Chris Yul Brynner knows, even though he doesn't play Shichiroji's other roles in the movie, right? Like, he's not the right-hand man, but he is the old friend. And he also has the whole bit of saying, there's got to be something else to this, right? Right? Like, you're not really doing it just for food to take care of these people just because it's the right thing. Surely not. Surely there's gold in it, right? Really? There must be gold. Maybe diamonds, silver. It's something, right? And he insists on that all the way to the point where that is how he is comforted as he is dying. Is, no, you were right all along. There was gold, totally. There was totally gold. There was lots of gold. So much gold. And he's like, yeah, I knew it. And so it's kind of like, okay, yeah, sure. But at the same time, he is also the person who, when it looked dire, and they were basically told to leave, he was the one that was like, the townsfolk literally asked us to leave, and we surrendered all our guns to the bandits. What are you talking about going back? Like, what do you mean? Why would we do that? But then he does show up, of course, after all. And then we also have Lee, played by Robert Vaughn, who I don't think really has a direct analog in Seven Samurai. So we have combinations of some of the other characters from Seven Samurai, but Lee is kind of an invention just for Magnificent Seven, where he's a gambler. He's known as having like a reputation for being an expert like marksman and gunslinger, but he also, as we discover, has some real baggage. Like, he is constantly paranoid that people are coming for him. He has a little bit of PTSD. There's a moment where he has a perfect shot against one of the escaping bandit scouts. And it's very important that they take out the scout so that the rest of the bandits don't learn that the gunslingers are in town. But he can't make himself shoot. And someone else has to take the shot. Brit takes the shot, I think. And is the one that is later, realizes something's going on with you, man. And then we even get like a little arc for him wherein he, even in the big fighting, like, he's initially starting to have kind of like a panic attack and kind of runs away a little bit instead of helping. But he eventually does, put himself in harm's way and takes out several guys, but then is ultimately killed. So those are the 7 in Magnificent Seven. Maybe just briefly, I'll talk about the characters in the 2016 version.
Okay.
One of the things that's notable about the 2016 version is a much more diverse cast, which I think is a good thing, and not just a like politically correct thing, but like meaningfully, it's like it makes sense and it's interesting. But we have Denzel Washington playing Sam Chisholm, who is the leader. Now, one of the things that they do change in the 2016 version is that he is someone who takes the job not because it's the noble right thing to do, even though that's part of it, but because he has a specific revenge vendetta against the bad guy, in that movie. And it's also not really like bandits in that movie. It is like an industrialist who is trying to say, I want to mine for gold in the land that these farmers are just trying to fail to raise crops on. I am going to offer to buy their land, and if they say no to the price that I give them, then I will hire people to shoot them. So it's, that is his deal, right? But Sam Chisholm, played by Denzel Washington, specifically wants revenge on that guy, and that's what gets him to take it, is learning that that's the guy. Um, and then we have Chris Pratt as Josh Faraday, who definitely plays the Steve McQueen role. And so those two map pretty closely so far, even though we have, a change in motive a little bit for the leader. Chris Pratt is Chris Pratt, so he is very much kind of jokey and he's a gambler, but that's a bit like the Steve McQueen character was. They definitely give him they borrow the same line that Steve McQueen gives in the 1960 version. The whole bit of like, how's the preparation going? And he says, well, let me tell you the story about this guy who fell off a 10-story building. And, the folks on all the other floors saw him go by the window. And as he passed each floor, he said, so far, so good.
That's pretty funny.
It is pretty funny. And so, like, they take that line almost verbatim and they give it to Chris Pratt. Although, oddly enough, they changed 10-story building to 5-story building. I don't know why, but it's fine. Doesn't matter. It works the same. It's just it's weird to lift the whole thing and then change that piece of it, but whatever. But then we have Goodnight Robichaux, played by Ethan Hawke, who is pretty close match to Lee from the 1960 version.
Going, I can hear you. I just
Okay, sure. And then he is best friends with Billy Rocks, who is played by Lee Byung-hun, who is Korean. And Billy Rocks is basically the Kyozo or Brit analog, with the modification that he is also best friends / kind of caretaker to Goodnight Robichaux, Ethan Hawke's character, where he is the badass fighter, but he also has trouble kind of like because he is so taciturn badass, he doesn't always make friends easily. And so he is kind of codependent with Ethan Hawke's character, who is kind of like a gambler with, a reputation that he's not sure he can deliver on anymore and that sort of thing. And so the two of them are a pair. Then we also have Vasquez, played by Manuel Garcia Rulfo, who I suppose would probably be the closest to like Heihachi or Bernardo, except that like, I don't know, like, it's nothing against the actor, but they really don't give that character a whole lot to do. He is Mexican, so they're like in terms of having this diverse cast, he represents that. Although notably in the 2016 version, this takes place in the United States. It's not a Mexican town, but so he's Mexican, but like there's not really like he's there. He does stuff, but he doesn't have like a sharply defined character the way the others do. And then the last, or no, there's two left. They have Vincent D'Onofrio playing Jack Horn, who, he's not really like any of the characters in any of the others. He's basically like big, burly, bearded mountain man who has kind of a strange, squeaky voice. He talks a little bit like this, but he's just a badass that he kills people with a hatchet. And, he used to be in the scalping game, but that's not something they pay for anymore. So he's kind of just living up in the mountains now. And that's basically him, But he gets a little bit of the, there's not really kids in this one. But otherwise, like, he has the slight, weird, grumpy old man sort of relationship with some of the townsfolk. And then last but not least, we have Red Harvest, who's a Native American, and he is coming in with he has the chip on his shoulder. He wants to fight with them because he's on a... He has been told by his people that his path lies apart from theirs, and Denzel Washington says, "We're going to go fight wicked men," and he says, "Yeah, that sounds good." So he joins them, and that's where we get with the 2016 one, is that a lot of the themes are just kind of stripped out of it. Like, we don't really get very much the the boss, like the bad guys, not being bandits who, like one of the things that I think is really important in both Seven Samurai and the 1960 Magnificent Seven is the discovery before the final battle. We thought we were going to chase the bandits away because they're going to discover this town is not easy prey and they're going to move on. They're going to go do something else. But then they discover by spying on them, they're starving. They have nothing. If they don't succeed in robbing this village, they're going to starve to death. And so they will stay and fight to the last man because they don't have anything else.
Right.
And that's an important plot point in, Seven Samurai and the 1960 version that's just gone in the 2016 version because these are all just hired goons by a guy who wants to build gold mines. And so, like, they establish he's just that bad a guy, but it doesn't explain at all why anyone else would be willing. Like, it's one thing to say he has a lot of money to pay them, but once you have ridden into a town with, like 40 guys and a machine gun on a wagon, and you're down to maybe 10 or 15, and you start saying, well, wait a minute here. What's going on here? What are we doing?
Right. Why would they keep coming at that point?
Yeah, exactly.
Whereas the bandits are given in the other movies are given a very good reason why they continue to come at them.
Right. And the other thing that doesn't let's maybe go back and talk about the themes that are in the others before just bringing them up by saying that they're not in the new one. So we've kind of covered like the cast of characters for the different versions, but let's talk about some of the themes that are in common, in particular between the main two that we're talking about here. Do you want to start? Just because I've been talking for a bit.
I covered the one that I feel like is one of the main themes, in that, it's the glamour of the samurai as this like noble warrior is drawn up, just like the gunslinger. This lore of who they are. Like, it definitely paints that through all the way up to getting to where they are in the fight. And even in parts of the fight, like there are parts of the fights with the bandits where that lore is painted up. But then what makes the deaths so impactful is that they are gritty, they are unglamorous, they are, with the exception of a couple, they're not heroic. There's this theme of like, as grand as your lifestyle may be, or as grand of a fighter as you may be, like, death comes to us all. Mm-hmm. And there's very much I'm trying to think how to say it. Like, they made this trade-off at the beginning that there really comes at the end of, like, it was never about just getting the rice. It was truly about, we have these skills and these people need it. We could be risking our lives, mm-hmm. but is this something that we want to do with our talents? And they all agree that is what they want to do. And that's where, again, I think that's a little more powerful in the Seven Samurai. Mm-hmm. And it may even be like the small things, like, even though, like you said, like, Harry does ultimately like rise to the occasion, but mm-hmm. there's always this like, oh, well, we're going to get the gold, right? It and that never really happens in the Seven Samurai. Like, they're all like, they all know why they're there, mm-hmm. And it's complicated too, because there's also a little bit of like, which makes it very real. And I think this is why I like the themes that are in these movies so much, is that there's complicated motivations. Part of it is it's not about the rice, but it's also not just about defending the peasants and doing what's right with your skills. Like I said, some of it's about, you know, can I, am I good enough? Can I help these people? Can only 7 of us take on 40 bandits? Like
Mm-hmm.
almost like a test of our own mettle. And it's always, that's almost like this weird like subset in the movie
Mm-hmm.
of, can we do this? Like, are we good enough to do this? And is this
Right.
the right thing to do?
Mm-hmm.
And I really like that kind of interwoven tapestry of mental part. And that's why, again, I go back to the Seven Samurai. Not only is it well delivered there, but it's more highlighted in some of the conversations between gotta pull the cheat sheet out,
Yeah.
between Kanbei and Shichichiro, Chichiroji, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
In that, they kind of analyze that of like, hey, like we're having like you, I think you pointed out a great line where he says, we got 7 more of them, but those came at a very heavy cost.
Mm-hmm.
There's this, there's more to that line than just it costs us a lot to get 7. It's like there's a pride that they got to check off 7 more and they were able to accomplish it. But then there's that gritty reality of this is what we signed up for. Like, this could kill us,
Mm-hmm.
and are we sure we want to keep going? And they kind of like, they don't say it out loud, but there's kind of this tacit like, yes, we have to finish this. And
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of exclamation point by Kikuchiyo rushing into, I know there's character reasons why he does it, but there's also broader story thematic reasons why he rushes in to kill the leader, and why he doesn't wait and they don't wait it out is because, they have to finish it. Like, they've
Right.
gotten this far and they've taken this many costs already, and they realize that this could cost them their lives. And he's kind of like I said, that exclamation point of this cost me my life, but I helped finish this.
Yeah.
And it's very, it's not dark, like and that's the thing that's kind of weird about it, because you would think this would be kind of like a dark theme, but it just, if I keep saying the word gritty, but I mean it in like in a reality, like it
Yeah.
touches like true parts of your psyche. So anyway.
Well, yeah. There's an element of tragedy in it, because like it's one. You know, if we follow sort of the evolution of the deal being made, right? We already start off with these farmers basically saying, we definitely like don't have enough to afford what samurai should cost. Um, so we have to hope that there would be some that would be willing to do it for just rice, which is way less than normally they would want, gold or other valuables. But um, but they're in a position where like rice is their good stuff. Like they are saying, in order to be able to pay the samurai rice, we have to not eat that rice. We have to eat millet instead, which is way less like nutritious and unpleasant to eat. Um, and so they are saving the rice as a precious treasure because that is all they have to offer, even though they know even that is paltry compared to what most samurai would expect and would, by caste standards, be entitled to, right? So they're already in that tough spot. And then as they are trying to hire enough of them based on this rice, the rice gets stolen. But here's where we have kind of an amazing moment where they realize, oh no, like the rice got stolen. Now we won't even be able to hire the few that we had already attracted. This is the end of it. But then Katsuhiro is the only one who I think observes that bit, and he tosses them some money enough for them to buy, like replace the rice that was stolen. And so all of a sudden, at this point, it's not even the rice, right? Like Katsuhiro is the only one who like knows this, but like he's now paying for the rice, right? Or at least the rice they had on them. Like there's more back at the other place. But then, as everyone comes back to the village, they are getting their bowl of rice every day. But then gradually, what we have is Katsuhiro who meets Shino. Like, well, so like there's also the element of like the town is not unanimous in their desire for the samurai to even come. There are several of them that are worried like this is just going to make things worse. The bandits are going to hit us extra hard if they know that we tried to fight back. You're just going to get a bunch of us killed. And then they also worry like you're inviting dangerous people with weapons to come to our town. How do we know that they're not going to be just as bad as the bandits? How do we know they're not going to feel like, oh, you're only paying us rice then? Well, I guess we'll also take your women. And so we have one of the notable farmers who forces his daughter to cut her hair and dress like a boy because he's worried that she will be raped by the samurai. But Katsuhiro discovers that by accident. And is meeting with her, and he decides I'm going to give her my rice because I'm a dopey teenager who's in love with the only girl that I know, and she basically says, "Thank you, but I'm actually not going to eat it because there's an old grandma that's starving to death, and I would actually rather give it to her if that's okay." And Kyozo observes that and goes and tells the others as they're preparing to eat their rice. And he's like, everyone else is just eating millet while we enjoy this rice. And that's when they kind of say, that doesn't feel great. Even though the rice is supposedly their pay for being here and doing what they're doing, they end up sharing that rice with everybody else. Now, there's a pragmatic aspect of that, like you're trying to train all these people to also be soldiers so that they can fight and help defend their own village, and it's going to be needed to fight off 40 bandits. So having them be more well fed is good, but it just becomes this thing of like even the nominal fee that they were being given is now being shared among everybody. And I just that development over time of having it like any sort of pretense that it's not just because they want to help people is stripped away until there's really nothing left, and it can only be that. And that's even when there are revelations like some of the people in the town don't really want them to be there. Some of the people in the town have been hiding stolen weapons, which is notable. There's a cultural element that might not read for everyone watching the movie today, which is to say that legally, those farmers are not allowed to own those weapons. And the only way they would have them is if they were stolen from either living or dead samurai. And so the fact that, Kikuchiyo shows up with him, he's thinking, look, more swords and armor and weapons for us to fight with. But some of the other samurai are like, oh, okay, this is a town that has robbed and or killed other samurai before. And then didn't tell us and kept all these secret because they knew what we would think about it when we found out. And so those, the idea that even past all of those things, they stay, like you said, because they have these skills and the farmers don't. And what are you going to use them for? What is the right thing? What is the right way to use those skills? And if it's not to defend people who need it against wickedness, then what are you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that I really liked about these is they don't follow the same pattern of like a traditional epic.
Hmm.
There's not. I'm trying to pull up like Joseph Campbell's
Yep.
Hero's Journey.
Hmm.
Yeah, I'm sure you as a writer know that. But that's kind of like the standard,
Hmm.
right? And there all these steps aren't followed. Like there isn't just sort of like this establishment
Hmm.
of like the movie begins with a raid. It's there's not an ordinary world. There's not like a starting point
Hmm.
of like just sort of normal happiness or whatever. I mean, it kind of is there in that the normal world is that they are always raided by bandits, but it's kind of flips it on its head a little bit. And then the call to adventure isn't really our hero's call to adventure. It's the townspeople's call to go
Hmm.
solve this problem.
Right.
Refusal of the calls in there a little bit, with the, but again, it's not a hero. It's
Yeah.
that now the townspeople who have got the call to adventure are going to recruit other people who maybe aren't on board with it 100%.
Yeah. I mean,
You know,
it's an example where there's not a solo protagonist, and to the extent that there is a classical literary protagonist in the story, it's really represented by the town and not the samurai,
right.
because it is the town that has a problem and sets out to take action to change it, and then struggles through that and is victorious at the end. Samurai are just the people who help them do it.
Yeah, the
But
samurai are almost like the meeting of the mentor part of it.
mm-hmm,
They're almost like the Gandalf, you know, of the story.
mm-hmm,
But we focus but we're spending our time on them as opposed to the town's journey,
mm-hmm,
to through it. So it offers a different perspective on like what you would think of an epic film, and I really enjoyed that part of it as well.
mm-hmm.
That it didn't just follow, albeit creatively, most of these things that we're talking about. Star Wars follows it, Harry Potter follows it. I mean, Marvel comic books follow it. I mean, there's a lot of things that have that pattern to
Yeah.
them. That this uses pieces of it, but it interweaves them in different ways. Like
Mm-hmm.
it feels a little bit different, and it was kind of refreshing to watch. And
Well,
in that sense, yeah,
one of the things that I think is part of that, I think, is that there's a reflection on like the whole Campbell hero's journey sort of thing is certainly like it's full of archetypes that resonate with like Western art generally, and it's very common there. And that's not to say that those stories don't get told in like Eastern art, but there's some elements of difference in the way stories are told in like Chinese stories, Japanese stories, and so on compared to American or European stories. And there tends to be more of a focus in Eastern storytelling on collective action for the good of the community and less about the hero who saves the day. I don't want to talk too much about that because I'm not an expert on it, but like that's one of the reasons I think it's important to watch movies that are not always from your country sometimes, right? They present other viewpoints. And so I think you're right that in this case that, like it's it's coming at it from a different perspective because on the one hand, there are lots of parts in the movie where we really are primarily with the samurai, like they are our point of view characters. But we also like I didn't look at the clock, but it's like it's got to be like 20-25 minutes before we even get any of the samurai in the movie, right? Just the amount of time that is spent with the townsfolk just deciding what to do and then sending people into the town and the initial struggles to try to like figure out how that's all going to work. That's a significant there's a fair amount of time that passes before they even get to meeting their first of the samurai.
yeah, no, I agree, and that's why I started describing it as like not following that hero journey at all,
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of backtracking and saying, well, yeah, no, but the town is kind of doing that. While their ordinary world is more like Harry Potter, who
Mm-hmm.
has kind of a crappy ordinary world, and he lives under the stairs. These guys get robbed by bandits, and there's sort of that exposition that follows the hero's journey, but they are not Harry Potter. They are the town,
Mm-hmm.
and it is interesting. And yeah, you would know more about some of the Eastern storytelling.
Well,
You just
I don't.
you just watch more of that than I do, and I'm not saying that you're an expert by any
Oh, yeah.
means, but you know I don't know. It was, like I said, it was refreshing. It was kind of fun to watch, and I do like that and it's probably why the Magnificent Seven stands out, because
Mm-hmm.
it's a Western that is following a different formula,
Yeah.
So
So one of the other themes about that it kind of ties into some of this is there's the element that is shared between them of the way that bravery looks different from a farmer's perspective compared to a samurai. Like we talked about the awkwardness of the spank scene in Magnificent Seven, but like the meaning is there, and it happens in Seven Samurai too. This idea of chastising the children for saying their fathers are cowards, because it's like they're, you know, what you're saying, I'm brave for doing the things that I do, but your fathers are not brave for doing the things that they're trained to do. Like I can't grow rice, and we need rice to eat. So like why, just because I can swing a sword, you think that's cooler and that makes it better somehow? Because one of the other elements that they kind of get into, and there's a substantial scene in both of the movies where they're mostly reflecting to each other and not the townsfolk so much, but this element of like, I think they're talking to Kachuhiro in Seven Samurai and to Chico um, in Magnificent Seven, but what they're talking about is, sure, there's glory of a kind in doing what they do, of honing these skills and being good at them and all of that. But it also leads to a life where you don't connect to anybody. You don't have a wife, you don't have a home, you don't have children, you don't have a family or a community. You constantly have communities that want you to come do a job and then leave. And that's the life that you have in store for you if that's what you sign up to be. And there's an element of regret in some of them. Like, not that it's not regret so much as like, oh my God, I made the wrong choice, but kind of a wistful recognition of that, right? This idea of spending enough time with this town and getting to know them enough to kind of get a taste of what they don't have and can't have otherwise. And that being ultimately what inspires them to make, this choice to protect them, because that's what we can do for them. And I can't be what they are, but I can help them. Because there are people who are out there who just want to prey on them. Because as much as we can say, like, oh, the bandits are starving too, it's like, yeah, but the bandits are starving in a lifestyle of their own choosing. Um, so it's like, if you're starving, if you're a starving bandit, that's a reflection on you being a bad bandit, not that someone is victimizing you.
right.
Um, and so, it's one thing to recognize it tactically of just saying they're not going to leave. They're not going to be scared away because they have to win or they'll die. But, to recognize like these people deserve to be helped and we can do it. and their willingness to do that ultimately for nothing, for no pay or compensation at all. And then at the end, it's the ending, and this is again true in both of those, is there's an expectation when it's over. Four of the samurai, four out of the seven have been killed. Four in same in Magnificent Seven, but they are not told by the village afterwards, "Thank you so much. Stay as long as you like." No, the expectation is, "And you should leave now. We are so appreciative for what you did, and now please go." And that's why it's this recognition of Kanbei saying, he's the one that gets the line in Seven Samurai. I think they give it to some other character in Magnificent Seven, I think. But this recognition of, like, this was not our victory. This was, and this comes down to what we were just saying. Like, it's really more like the town is the protagonist, because it is the town's victory. Like, they're the one that had a struggle that they overcame with the help of the samurai, but the samurai basically agreed to help this town ultimately for nothing. The majority of them got killed, and now they're asked to move on. And so, what did they gain ultimately? Well, nothing, except the idea that they have continued to live their lives according to the code that they feel is important.
Right.
But so, like, that's the theme that I think is the one that I kind of started to get into. The 2016 version just really doesn't include that element of it at all. It's really much more the standard kind of, well, these guys are heroes who are doing the right thing. And that's it. There's no real reflection over, like, what it means to the life of a gunslinger versus the life of a farmer. There's not really any time spent on that. I mean, to an extent, because you have Ethan Hawke's character, who's kind of a parallel for Lee, Robert Vaughn's character in Magnificent Seven. There's an element there of, like, that's as close as it gets to what we're talking about here. The idea that, you know, you end up with nightmares, troubled dreams, bad feelings, towns you can't go back to. When you live that lifestyle, that's what you have to look forward to. The more successful you are, the more faces you remember when you think about the people you've killed, and that sort of thing. And how it can be troubling in that regard. But in the 2016 version, that's really portrayed more as, like, sad backstory for that guy, and not a thematic representation of what it means to live the life of a gunslinger.
Right.
And in fact, like, Denzel Washington's character, like, it's implied he is only living this gunslinger type lifestyle because his family got killed by the bad guy, and now he wants revenge. And it's not just revenge, right? Like, he also wants to help. It's, he comes to like the town and wants to help them for that reason too. But I think having the bad guys be sort of like wealthy capitalists rather than desperate bandits, like, there's an interesting story to be told there, but it really does change the dynamic of what's happening. And it does take away some other pieces of it. So, like, what that movie, the 2016 movie, has is a likable cast, beautiful Western cinematography, and some good Western action. That's not a bad movie.
No.
But I will say that thematically it's a lot thinner than the other two. But yeah, I think it's worth watching if you want to watch an action western and you've watched The Quick and the Dead too many times already. It's not quite as silly as The Quick and the Dead, which I don't say in a derogatory way, because The Quick and the Dead is a very fun movie. But
I like We did.
Yeah, but it's a little bit more like that than say Magnificent Seven, or the 1960 version anyway. Uh, so what else? I mean, I feel like we've talked more about Seven Samurai than about the 1960 Magnificent Seven, but I mean, they are similar in a lot of respects, and so a lot of the plot beats that even though we focus on the Seven Samurai version, a lot of those are in the. Let's talk about how in Magnificent Seven they make the leader of the bandits more of like a person, like a character that we know,
Right.
and like his whole deal, because that's a significant difference beyond just the setting, right? Like having him be this guy that walks around in a silk shirt and sort of plays at being benevolent, um, and like you know tries to make it seem like you should thank me for only taking as much as I do. And like they kind of there's some of the conversations with the farmers in Seven Samurai. They make it sound like like there's a little bit of like he could be reasoned with. We don't have to fight. You know, and but we see it in Magnificent Seven.
Yeah, I think that I was thinking about that earlier when you were talking about like sort of the Eastern versus Western and that kind of stuff. Like the idea that we for the Western, like you almost need an identifiable villain,
Mm-hmm.
and whereas in the Seven Samurai, the villain is sort of this collective bandit.
Mm-hmm.
This now the bandits have a face that we can kind of I don't know we root against, but
Mm-hmm.
it is the face of the villain.
Well, the leader represents when we know the fight is done.
Right.
But he is a character to be defeated in Magnificent Seven, right? Like he is a character with a point of view that must be repudiated, even as his bandits are repelled from this town, right? Or not even repelled, but like eliminated, right? But like this mindset from him that, like one of the notable lines that they actually repeat in the 2016 version is like, if God did not want them to be sheared, he would not have made them sheep.
Right.
And just this implication that like it gets into the themes a little bit of like the difference between being a gunslinger and being a farmer. And but like from his perspective, like, and I think he as much as says this to the gunslingers later when he has the upper hand, is like, I don't hate you guys. I have nothing against you. Why would I? We do the same thing as far as I'm concerned. So these farmers got big heads and they decided that they were going to do something they weren't capable of, and they dragged you into a fight that wasn't yours. I don't want to fight with you. I want you, like, if you could just work for me, or if you don't, just leave. That's fine. I don't care. I am definitely going to punish this town for hiring you, but that doesn't need to be your problem, right? Because he's thinking like, oh, I know these guys. These guys are like me. They're doing this for pay. I get what I need from the town. They're thinking, oh, well, they think they can muscle in on my turf, but they didn't know, so I'll let them go. But he thinks it's, you know, he thinks they're sheep and thus deserve to be sheared by someone capable of it. And it is that perspective that what he's doing is what is the same as what, say, Chris and Vin are doing, right? He thinks it's the same, and that's the point of view that has to be fought, right? As opposed to bandits just being the threat.
Right.
I think that's interesting. Like I'm not sure. Like with some of the stuff that is a little thinner, just because it's a shorter movie in this one. Like there are some pieces of Seven Samurai that don't make their way over to Magnificent Seven, like the girl in town and how it's complicated because there's a whole caste thing, and that's why it's such a big deal that she knows sleeps with Kachuhiro. Like that's like the caste system of that time period, like that is like actually a big deal. It's not just like, oh my gosh, she slept with the farmer's daughter. It's like, oh no, seriously, that is like a serious breach of decorum. No one will ever marry her now, and she should be shunned and expelled from the village, that sort of thing. Like, and for the other characters to just for Kanbei to be as chill as to just say, everyone's really stressed out, let's just hang on a minute and recognize that these are two young people in a stressful situation. People make mistakes. We don't need to have this be the end of the world. Like, even that is pretty, like, he is not going so far as to say, no, we should support the relationship between these two. It's more like, hey, let's not ruin everything because of a simple, misstep. But he does see it as a misstep. And for that matter, it's a misstep just on the basis of how much the town reacts to it, right? It's like it almost gets everybody, their plan falling apart in the middle of the last night before the big battle. But then at the end, it's like none of that stuff is in Magnificent Seven, but Magnificent Seven does introduce, which is, I think, what you're saying, like this idea of, we want there to be a bad guy, and that's the face. This is the guy. We know him. We have to fight the bad guy, and when we beat the bad guy, we're good. That is definitely a typical storytelling trope in a lot of the movies that we know here. Yeah. So. What else? So
Covered everything
yeah.
that I. Yeah.
I think it's interesting that certainly what we have just from a filmmaking standpoint. I think watching the 1960 Magnificent Seven is certainly one of those where you don't really see any blood. What you see is a lot of like gunshot and a guy going, oh, and falling over and that sort of thing, as opposed to like anything more violent. But if you think about it, like, that's got to be all the more extreme in Seven Samurai, because they're fighting with swords and spears. There would be blood friggin' everywhere. But yeah. So anyway, these are great movies that people should
Yes.
watch. So if that's all, then so perhaps we should talk about what we're going to be doing next. So I had
Yeah.
put forth one kind of idea. What did you think about it?
I like that idea. I wasn't able to decide yet what my movie would
Okay.
be, but we can talk about the idea and then we can
Yeah.
follow up with
Well,
what it's going to be. Yeah.
yeah. So first of all, the idea that I kind of had suggested is the idea of like also rans, meaning there are lots of filmmakers on the original AFI list where we talked about, when we watched whatever movie was on there, we talked about how, like, well, if we were only going to have one movie from this filmmaker on there, instead of the one they put on the list, I think it should have been this other one. And then
Yeah.
what I was actually thinking about in that context is how on the AFI list, I think there's 3 Alfred Hitchcock movies, if I'm not mistaken, because there's North by Northwest, Notorious, or not Notorious, but Vertigo and Psycho, right?
Yeah.
My 2 favorite Hitchcock movies are not any of those 3. And so that's kind of what I was thinking, is that what if we watched either Notorious or Strangers on a Train, which are my favorite Hitchcock movies. And so to just kind of talk about it in the context of like, you know, they chose those movies for Alfred Hitchcock, but what about these other movies for Alfred Hitchcock? I think I'd
Yeah,
probably pick. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say I like the idea.
Mm-hmm.
What I would like is, can we follow up with what movies we're gonna watch? Like, let me look back at the list.
Mm-hmm.
I think you can decide between the two Alfred Hitchcock movies that you want. I'll
Mm-hmm.
I'll pick a filmmaker and something that I see that isn't on the list, and then we can release those later. But
Sure. Well, we don't necessarily have to pick them right now, but I did just pull up the 100 movies list if we wanted to talk through it a little bit, or if you'd rather we just do that offline, that's
I'd
okay.
rather do that
All
offline
right,
if
that's
that's
fine.
okay.
Okay, sure. So I think we'll wrap the episode up for tonight. Um, so thank you for listening and or watching, everybody, and we'll be back soon with our also rans. You could probably watch on my Twitter at Christiana Ellis. I will post what the movies are when we decide, and in the meantime, watch good movies.
Yay.
Yay!